Let me ask you something personal. When someone raises their voice near you, even if it has nothing to do with you, does something in your chest go tight? When a group of people laughs and you can't hear what they said, does a small part of you assume it's about you? If your answer is yes, and I think for a lot of you watching this, it is, there's a reason, and it started long before you were old enough to understand it. You were a child. You didn't deserve what happened, but the mind, in its desperate attempt to protect you, learned lessons it was never supposed to carry into adulthood. And here's the most unsettling part. You're still living by those lessons right now, every single day. Today, we're going to talk about the dark psychology of people who were bullied as kids, what it actually does to the brain, the patterns it creates, and the hidden strength that most people never notice beneath the surface of the wound. Here's what almost no one tells you about childhood bullying. It's not just a bad memory. It is a neurological event. When a child is repeatedly humiliated, threatened, or excluded, the brain begins flooding the body with cortisol, the stress hormone. Over time, the nervous system essentially recalibrates itself around threat. It begins treating the social world not as a place of connection, but as a battlefield. This is where hypervigilance is born, the constant scanning of rooms for danger, reading every facial expression, monitoring tone of voice, always watching. Not because the person wants to be paranoid, but because the brain was trained through repeated painful experience that the next attack could come from anywhere. Researchers call this an overactive amygdala response. The amygdala is the brain's alarm system. In people who were bullied as kids, it is often set to a hair trigger. It sounds the alarm even when there is no real danger. During a work meeting, a social gathering, a text message that takes too long to get a reply. Now, here's where it gets deeply personal, because the brain doesn't just change how it perceives threats, it changes how it perceives the self. When you were a child and you were repeatedly told, through words, through actions, through being excluded and targeted, that there is something wrong with you, the brain can only conclude one thing. Maybe they're right. Children do not have the cognitive tools to say, this person is cruel and I am not the problem. Their identity is still being formed, and the cruelty becomes part of the architecture. This is why so many adults who were bullied as kids carry a quiet but persistent sense of unworthiness. Not screaming inadequacy, not dramatic self-loathing, just a low hum in the background of everything they do. Am I enough? Do they actually like me? Is this going to fall apart? And then there's the people-pleasing. Oh, the people-pleasing. If you were bullied as a child, there is a high chance that you became incredibly good at reading other people's moods, needs, and emotions, not because you were weak, but because as a child, your safety depended on it. If you could figure out what the bully wanted or didn't want, maybe you could avoid becoming a target. If you could make yourself small enough, agreeable enough, useful enough, maybe they'd leave you alone. That survival strategy was brilliant when you were 10, but at 30, it turns into a relentless compulsion to keep everyone around you happy at the cost of your own needs. You apologize when you don't need to. You over-explain your boundaries because you fear confrontation. You say yes when everything inside you is screaming no, because somewhere deep in your nervous system, saying no still feels like danger. There's another pattern that shows up in bullying survivors, and this one is particularly painful: the constant anticipation of rejection. Psychologists call it rejection-sensitive dysphoria. A friend cancels plans, and it feels like abandonment. A partner seems quiet, and the mind immediately assumes something is wrong with you. A coworker doesn't smile back, and you spend the next 3 hours replaying what you might have done wrong. The emotional response to perceived rejection is not proportional, it is enormous. Because it isn't just responding to what just happened, it is responding to every single time it happened before. Every taunt, every exclusion, every moment you sat alone and felt invisible and wondered why no one chose you. That child is still inside the adult body, and that child is terrified of going through it again. But here is where the psychology gets remarkably complex and honestly profound. Because everything we've talked about so far, the hypervigilance, the empathy, the emotional depth, the ability to read a room in seconds, those are not just wounds. In the right context, they are extraordinary gifts. People who were bullied as children are statistically more empathetic than average. They've lived the experience of being on the outside. They know what it feels like to be invisible. So when someone else is struggling, they notice and they care in a way that people who've never been hurt in that way often simply can't. Many of the world's most profound therapists, writers, advocates, and leaders carry this exact history. The sensitivity that made them a target as children became the exact quality that allows them to connect deeply, to lead with compassion, and to create spaces where others feel seen. There's also something called post-traumatic growth. Unlike post-traumatic stress, which is the wound, post-traumatic growth is what can happen when a person processes and integrates trauma into their identity. It is the reason why some of the most resilient, grounded, self-aware adults you will ever meet are the ones who survived the loneliest childhoods. They learned early that they could not rely on the approval of others for their sense of self. They learned to find quiet, to find purpose in pain, to build inner strength in the absence of external safety. They didn't become strong in spite of what they went through. They became strong because of what they refused to let them define them. Now, there is one more thing I need to say, and I want you to really hear this. If you are someone who was bullied as a child, and you are carrying any of the patterns we've talked about today, you are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are not too much. You are a person who survived something genuinely hard at an age when you were completely powerless to stop it. Your nervous system adapted. Your mind built walls where doors should have been. And now that you are no longer that child, you get to choose which lessons to keep and which to finally let go. Therapy helps, specifically trauma-informed therapy. EMDR, somatic work, and internal family systems therapy have all shown profound results with people carrying this exact kind of childhood wound. And the beautiful thing? The same emotional intelligence that was forged in the fire of childhood cruelty is the very thing that makes healing possible, if you're willing to turn it inward. The child who sat alone at lunch, who walked the long way home to avoid the hallway, who cried in silence because they thought no one would care, that child deserved better. Full stop. And the adult that child became, they deserve to finally know what you went through was not your fault. What you carry is not your identity, and who you are becoming with every ounce of awareness and courage it takes just to understand yourself is something genuinely remarkable. If this video touched something real in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to go even deeper into the psychology of hidden wounds and the minds that carry them, subscribe, because we're just getting started.